Good afternoon once more from the Working Class Movement Library, and welcome to our Invisible Histories series of talks. Particular welcome today to Deej Malik-Johnson, our speaker today for Black History Month, who's going to be talking to us about Len Johnson. Deej is from the Len Johnson Memorial Campaign, also from Black Lives Matter Manchester, so we're very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I'm going to share the screen now, Deej, and go over to you. I'll make that bigger, hopefully. There you go. Right, so I'll move that on past the Vimto statue that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can go to slide 3. Fantastic. Shall I start? Brilliant. So yeah, Len Johnson's dad, Billy, came to England from Sierra Leone, West Africa, aged 18 as an apprentice ship's engineer on the SS Benin, and was eventually given a job in Liverpool at the company's repair works before moving to Manchester, where he began boxing for a living, having found very few opportunities were available elsewhere. He boxed in the boxing booths of the era, where punters would pay for an attempt to go a few rounds against a professional with the hope of winning prizes. It was at a boxing booth that Billy met Margaret Mayer, a Mancunian woman of Irish heritage, and by Len's account, very proud of it. Despite the hostility they received from many around them, they married at Charlton Registry Office on the May 17th, 1902, although there were no records of any mayors there to witness it. On the 22nd of October, their first child, Leonard Benker Johnson, was born in Clayton, East Manchester, which at the time was a hotbed of iron and steel works and engineering. Next slide, please. After the opening of the ship canal in 1894, and with the direct trading with Britain's African colonies, a small black community formed. Although they faced some hostility, there were such locals, such as the Connells, who were very welcoming and supportive. But life was hard from the beginning. The local media was hostile to even a tiny black population. Black people were often barred from pubs, unable to rent homes, unable to live with their white wives, and many, like Len's mother, were attacked by other white women. Margaret was left permanently scarred by one such attack. By 1905, the family had moved to Leeds, and his father was touring as a boxer. The family would travel with him, and at the age of 2, Len was put in a ring with a pair of boxing gloves and labelled the world's youngest boxer. Despite this, Len never actually saw a boxing match until he was 17. At the start of the First World War, the family moved back to Manchester because, let's face it, Yorkshire is no place to live. They lodged with the Connells, who had always been supportive, with Billy joining the army and Len working initially as an errand boy, earning about 6 shillings per week. Next slide, please. After a year, Len got a job as an apprentice at Crossley Brothers gas engine makers, where one day he got into a fight with a fellow apprentice. This incident prompted Billy to take Len and his brother Albert to the boxing gym to start training. This was at the Alhambra on Ashnold Road, which at the time was run by Jack Smith, who was a former wrestler. He noticed Len's talent early, and in 1921, Len made his debut. Next slide, please. In later years, when he talked of this time, he said, "As I look back, it seems that never before had one started on a career more ill-fitted physically or mentally than I was that year." His mother had made him a pair of boxing shorts, and bought him a clothesline to use as a skipping rope. His training outside of the gym consisted solely of him skipping in his backyard. Nevertheless, Len won his first fight and ran back home to give his mother his first purse, a princely 13 shillings. Next slide, please. From here, Len won as a middleweight against Eddie Pearson at Manchester's Free Trade Hall on January 1922. In total, of his 127 fights that he fought, Len won 92. He lost 29 and he drew 6. His impressive scorecard brought him fame in Britain, and he beat European middleweight champion Roland Todd at Bellevue in 1927. The following year, he beat the world-renowned Leon Giacovacci, and in 1929, he got the better of the European cruiserweight champion Michel Bonoglia, as well as beating the British middleweight champion at the time. However, at this time, despite Len being at the peak of his abilities, he was denied the chance to go for the British middleweight title himself, and indeed was stripped of the British Empire title that he'd won in Australia. The British Boxing Board of Control, the BBBC, which was the national authority on such matters, formally stated that he could not compete for titles simply because he was black. Despite Britain's rich history of black boxers, racist attitudes about the mental and physical dispositions of black people permeated the game. Full-time British segregationist campaigners such as the evangelical preacher Frederick Brotherton Mayer argued that white athletes did not have the, quote, animal development of black people and could therefore not compete with their, again, quotes, instinctive passion for violence. There were also worries over the consequences of emboldening Britain's colonial subjects. For a nervous British establishment, there were far too many negative ramifications for their rule over the empire, if even an innocent sports tournament could even temporarily demonstrate the equality of the races, the equality of black and white people. This is why in 1911, the Home Secretary, Winston Churchill, banned interracial boxing matches, and the BBBC followed suit, implementing the infamous Rule 24, which banned black boxers from title fights. The BBBC's bar remained in place until the mid-1940s. Next slide, please. Manchester rose in anger for Len. Demonstrations were held across the city, and a protest delegation of boxers was sent to the BBBC's London headquarters. But the situation demoralised him, and he retired from the profession in 1933, choosing instead to mentor young boxers. Around this time, the world was changing, and Len began to get political. Fascism was on the rise in Manchester as well as abroad. In Spain, African Americans were leading white Americans into battle for the very first time as volunteers in the International Brigade. While many professional sportsmen from Manchester, such as boxers Joe Norman and Bob Goodman, as well as the Bellevue daredevil motorcyclist Clem Beckett, had gone on to defend the democratic Spanish government from Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini's might. The bombs that fell over Madrid ended up falling over Manchester, and Len served in the Civil Defence Corps throughout World War II. Next slide, please. He served as a rescue foreman alongside his brother Billy, initially in Gorton, before transferring to the ARP Centre in Moss Side. Len's superintendent, Mr. S.L. Robson, during this time described him as, quote, a human dynamo, not worried about the tremendous risks he was taking of having buildings collapse over him in order to save the lives of the bombed out. Slide 10, please. Towards the end of the war, at a time of great admiration for the Soviet Union's part in defeating Nazism, Len joined the Communist Party, and in 1945 was invited to attend the 5th Pan-African Congress, which was held in Manchester by what is now the All Saints building at Manchester Metropolitan University. Next slide, please. While it is in no way as well remembered generally as it should be, this conference, which celebrated its 75th anniversary just this past month, was held to discuss the future for Black Britons, Afro-Europeans, African Americans, and Europe's Black colonies in Africa and in the Americas, in halls that were decked in the flags of Ethiopia, Haiti, and Liberia, which were at the time the world's only free Black countries. To give some idea of the significance of the Pan-African Congress, we can list a few of its attendees. W.E.B. Du Bois, the seminal African-American genius of sociology. Jomo Kenyatta, leader of the Kenyan independence movement. He became Kenya's first president. Jaja Wachuchu, who became the first Speaker of the Nigerian House of Representatives. Jamaica's Dudley Thompson, who went on to practice and reform the law across the Caribbean and Africa, supporting independence movements in Belize and in the Bahamas, as well as serving as a senator in Jamaica. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president and the first prime minister of Ghana, and leading figure in African socialism, as well as figures who played a significant role in the first free governments of Malawi, Trinidad, and Barbados, amongst others. Slide 12, please. Among these luminaries, R. Len discussed and debated for 8 days. A number of resolutions were passed, culminating in the conference's final challenge to the colonial powers. Something which, personally, I think rings so true even today. Quotes, "We are determined to be free. We want education. We want the right to earn a decent living, the right to express our thoughts and emotions, and to adopt and to create forms of beauty." End of quotes. Now, between 15 and 25 years of this conference, almost every single Caribbean and African nation had either been granted or won its independence. Slide 13, please. By 1946, Manchester's Black community had swelled to a number of around 10,000 people as Black ex-servicemen and migrant workers settled down in places like Moss Side. Len was wide to the discrimination that they were facing and could potentially face. And so he set up the New International Club on Grafton Street with his friends Sid Booth and Wilf Charles, two white working class Mancunians who had fought against the fascists in Spain. The New International attempted to channel what is called the growing feeling of frustration with the substandard housing and jobs for Black people in Manchester, and wanted to be both a social club and an organising space for Black people to unite and solve their problems in Manchester. The principles of the club were declared in its founding statement: true internationalism, colonial liberation, the ending of racial discrimination, peace. The club was one of the first places to hold African and Caribbean club nights in Manchester, and where young Black and white workers could blend and meet each other. But it was also the bedrock of building connections between Manchester's workers' movement with Black people all over the world, including organising solidarity with the Trenton Six, a group of black men from New Jersey sentenced to death by an all-white jury for a murder that they simply hadn't committed. But it held a power of its own here. In 1946, when a major shipping company in Manchester attempted to sack all of its black sailors, the club's membership of several hundred people held street meetings to appeal to white sailors who had stuck with their coloured colleagues and stop the job losses. Similarly, after being tipped off, the club's leadership also helped cancel a policy of segregated queues in Manchester's labour exchanges for unemployed black and white workers. Next slide, please. From his boxing days, Len had a loyal fan in the figure of the great Paul Robeson, who travelled over to perform at the club in support of its solidarity efforts with African Americans. The concert became legendary for the spectacle of Robeson performing outside for tens of thousands of Mancunians who couldn't get a ticket for the sold-out club event. And when Robeson's passport was seized by the American authorities during McCarthyism, Len, Wilf, and Sid were some of the leaders of the Let Robeson Sing campaign. When he was finally allowed to travel again, Robeson penned a thank you letter to the club for its support, assuring them that he would never forget that it was the people of Manchester and of other industrial areas of Britain who gave me the understanding of the oneness of people, a concept which I have based my career as an artist and a citizen. Next slide, please. In 1953, Len, despite himself being a teetotaler, had his sights on the segregation in pubs which had been a feature of Black Mancunian life. And so he and Wilf went to the Old Abbey Tap House in Hume, where he asked for a drink. As they had anticipated, Len was refused. And so Len had the ammunition that he needed. He wrote a newspaper column decrying segregation. He went to the town hall speaking to councillors and got support of the Lord Mayor, Alderman Moss, and Manchester and Salford Trades Council, and he organised. A few days later, Len, Wilf, Councillor Harold Collins, and reportedly over 200 black and white Mancunians arrived en masse at the Abbey, again to ask for a drink. This time, given the overwhelming numbers, the landlord relented, and in a moment, the colour bar that had been a feature of not only the Abbey but pubs across Manchester was finally lifted. Next slide, please. Aside from being a well-respected community leader, Len stood as a council candidate several times. He wrote a monthly boxing column for the Daily Worker newspaper while working as a truck driver. He penned pioneering essays on the welfare of retired athletes, the potential physical impairment that boxing causes, and the lack of sports facilities for working class young people in Manchester. One story from around this time came to me from someone that Len used to train. After seeing this Jewish lad bullied, Mr. Johnson was, as he always called him, taught him how to defend himself and how and where to punch to give enough time to run. Whilst this lad was never destined to be a prize fighter, in fact, Len specifically told him he wasn't allowed to try to be a prize fighter. He had the confidence and skills to challenge the National Front thugs as they attempted to terrorise Black and Asian communities in Oldham and Manchester in the 1970s and 80s. And now, in his old age, is still inspired by Mr. Johnson to fight racism and support refugees. Next slide, please. In later years, our Len worked as a lorry driver for Jack Silverman's haulage company in Oldham. In fact, he lived only 5 doors away from my grandparents on Waterloo Street, Glodwick in Oldham, spending some time recovering from ill health at a Black Sea report in his beloved Soviet Union, and occasionally supported, although remaining very proud, by the Manchester Ex-Boxers Association. He finally retired with not much money to his name, age 70. Next slide, please. When he died at Oldham Hospital in September 1974, it was a passing in relative anonymity in Britain, although it must be said that it was the first and potentially only time that the two sides of his life, his boxing and his comrades, had come together in such a way for his funeral. But he was mourned internationally as a pioneer for equality in sports. He was also remembered as a stalwart in the local labour movement, who had always worked to improve race relations among the city's working class. However, a well-deserved renewal of interest in Len Johnson has taken place in the past few decades. A biography had been written about him, as had at least 2 plays, and Labour MP Afzal Khan has encouraged the idea of a memorial for him. Next slide, please. Our Change.org petition, change.org/Len Johnson, for a monument now to Len Johnson now has over 1,000 signatures. Both Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham and the leader of the City Council, Sir Richard Leese, have stated support, and the BBC ran a piece on Len on its front page of its website. And just today, Sky Sports News has run a piece on Len as well. It seems that our Len may finally be seeing the start of the recognition that he deserves. Next slide, please. Potentially the most positive aspect of the long overdue toppling of Edward Colston's statue in Bristol is the wave of honest discussion about the sordid past of Britain's ruling elite. But if this period can highlight the grotesque norms of this country, once considered acceptable, then it should also be time for the discussing and the remembering of those who came up against the system and fought it. For Manchester, there can surely be no better testament to the spirit of resistance than the figure of Len Johnson. And last slide, please. As I'd mentioned in passing before, I think my daughter mentioned before I started that it's quite telling that Manchester has more public monuments to soft drinks than it does to Black Mancunians. And so with that thought, I'd like to end today's talk, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Deej. Thank you. You are getting, if you're on gallery view, a lot of applause there, silent but nonetheless heartfelt. Yeah, you've got a lot of Mancunians. You may have slightly lost the Yorkshire vote at the start there, but
my stepdad's from Skipton, I have to say.
Okay. So yeah, over to you guys. Questions, comments. We have some thanks in the chat. If you want to type something into the chat, but if you want to wave to me, I will try and Anne, okay. Can you unmute, Anne? Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, my name's Anne Noon, and I've been doing family research, and I've actually found out that Len Johnson was the manager of the Cotton Club, which was located at 28 Ducie Street in Manchester, All Saints, and that's where my great-great-granddad used to live. So I've done quite a bit of research into him, and trawling through the newspapers, I found that the New International Society met there on August the 18th, 1948 at 7:30 p.m. And it was all about the Jews in Palestine, and it was Captain I.J. Rubin, MC. So I just found it, that's why I've come to, join the talk, because I just find it very fascinating that my family's history is tied up with the boxer. So I'd just like to share that thought with everybody. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Anne. Like, I have to say that is something which I found, the more I've dug into Len's story, this has been a really common thing, is that his life was interactive with so many different people. Like, when I first started working on doing stuff on Len, I didn't realize he lived so close to my grandparents, and I think it's one of these people who's was just quietly around and was just making sometimes a lot of quiet waves. But he's just such a Mancunian, so embedded in our community, and just quietly working along and changing the world as he goes.
Yes, yeah. Elizabeth has got her hand up. Elizabeth, are you able to unmute yourself?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Deej, apart from that is an incredible talk. It just was incredible, and so much that I just didn't know, and the connections there are so deep into Manchester. I feel so proud and elevated, and I don't think, I thank the Working Class Library for that as well, because you can't understand how much it elevates us to feel this sense of history within Manchester. So it's a thank you, first of all. The second thing is to say, there was clearly a tone there, this comment that you made. It was very important about this idea that Black people have this just natural will to want to be violent almost. And, I often support, through the trade union movement, the voice of Black men who are very much stigmatized, feared, sometimes before they can even open their mouth, let alone what the experience of women is. But, that I do recognize that for Black men. So I would just like to know your comment, really, in terms of that, because the words you used was just so powerful, but I thought they were relevant to today. Well, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Liz, this, I can no longer say that I'm a young Black man, but I remember very well my experiences from going to school, being in my primary school, the only Black kid. In my secondary school, one of very few in our year. And I was always labelled and seen as one of, if there was someone getting in trouble, even if I was passing right by, I was one of the people in trouble. I was incredibly quiet and shy, and but I was clearly, I was Black and of a certain size, and so the thoughts that were there, it made me feel on edge a lot of the time. I think it's the thing of you have to. W.E.B. Du Bois talked about double think, that we this double consciousness that we have to maintain, trying to be ourselves. And I think Franz Fanon talks about this too with Black Skin, White Mass, of having the ability, we know who we are, but we also need to present a certain version of ourselves for what to a white audience. I'm very conscious that if I'm starting work somewhere, my voice will suddenly go lighter, and I'll keep my head down. And it's these subtle things which we have, because we still to this day carry around these racist ideas, which were, like, let's be honest, these were embedded in our culture as a way to justify slavery way back when. And they've just been replicated over and over to the point where we see what the stop and search statistics are. Like, there was the story today about how a lot of black men are being stopped by the police and searched for like doing like a little fist bump to say hello, because that's obviously like a gang sign or something. Without going too deep into it, like, I've had interactions with the police myself, and I've always been very aware of this thing of having to present myself in the most as the most non-threatening way possible, because I know that I'm not allowed to be angry. Like, like a story which I often tell is when I was working in America, and there was a changeover weekend with my work. Basically, we'd work for 2 weeks straight, and then we'd have 4 days off. And so I was walking around around my friend's house in Virginia. Now, where he lived, it wasn't too nice, but it was a place that looked too nice for someone who looked like me to be in it. And I remember walking down the street one day on my own, because they wanted to get some drinks, and I was sober, and I'm from like the hills above Oldham. Walking is something I can do. So I was like, I'm gonna go down. And I was literally just minding my own business, had my headphones in, and I won't say the words that were shouted at me by this officer, but I didn't realize that he was talking to me, because it wasn't okay. Eventually, I realized that he was indeed talking to me. And I turned around, and this officer had a gun drawn on me. And I had to, in that moment, realize and assess this situation. And the only thing that I had to keep myself alive was my ability to be extremely British at the time, and was like, I'm sorry, officer, does that happen to be a problem? And when you can to try and make myself seem like not me, be a little bit confusing of going, because this face didn't match with that voice. And like, the officer literally said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I thought you was black." And in that moment, I just realized how dangerous and how quickly these ideas can spread. And I happen to have the privilege of being from somewhere else and having a reasonable education, and not having at the time 25 years of African-American experience, which made me feel certain ways towards the police. If I hadn't had that thing in my head right at that second, I could have been another one of these tens of thousands of African Americans dead on the street. And we shouldn't have to pretend to be somebody else just to be safe. And I think that's the pernicious side of racism. Racism isn't always just being called the N-word or the P-word. It's the not being able to be yourself comfortably. On the other thing, what your first point about how it feels, like, I'm mixed race. I have my working class Mancunian side, well, my working class Oldham side, I know has been active going back to Peterloo. My black side, my Bajan side, has been here, and I just always remember, despite being a working class Oldhamer, and despite knowing my history from my parents, never seeing either side of my family's history represented either in the school curriculum, they're not represented in university, they're not represented in public art, they're not represented on TV. And so it's like, it takes a lot. Like for me, like I never had a Black teacher. I only had my first Black academic person involved in my life at the age of 32 at university. And that representation matters. The knowing that you've got a place, that your people can do something. And I'll always remember, I'm sorry, I'm going really long on this question, but when I first went to Barbados, and suddenly seeing Black Prime Minister, Black lawyer, Black airplane pilot, like we could be anything. Like, yes, there were Black homeless people, but there were also Black businessmen. And it was like, wow, actually, we could be anything. But we don't see it. I think that's why these statues are important, because that's not just a random Black person. That's a working class Black Mancunian who faced some BS and did something about it. And that's why I think we need a statue for Len.
If anybody has not signed the petition by now, I'd be surprised, to be honest, but the link is there in the chat. Yeah, we know it to be true. Hazel has had her hand up. Hazel, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'll try.
Right, there you go. We can hear you. Great.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm very happy to know that Len's name and Len's achievements politically and as a sportsman are becoming more and more known. I first came across Len a few years ago, and I went to the Working Class Movement Library, and on a couple of occasions, because I had to cross the border, I'm a Mancunian living in Yorkshire. I came over to read through Len's personal archive, which was incredibly moving. When you're looking through scrapbooks that Len had made of sometimes if he appeared in a local paper or a flyer, he'd made these scrapbooks. And I think it's thank you to Len's family for giving those things to the museum for people like me to see. And also I saw a slide just then from our wonderful speaker just now about the things that have been documented about Len, and the book by Michael Herbert, Never Counted Out, as well as the personal archive that I looked through at the library. Michael Herbert had also donated his papers from when he was writing his book on Len. Now, this was before you could ping an email to somebody and say, tell me about this or tell me about that. He kept meticulous records, hand wrote everything, wrote to everybody that he thought Len would know, sportsmen, friends, everybody. And the responses, again, incredibly moving. And I think the things that have come across to me from knowing something like that was, you know, this great working class history, but nobody said anything negative about Len Johnson. In all these responses, people were talking about the things he did away from boxing as well, and what a nice, genuine man he was. And I can remember, I'm mixed race myself. My dad's family come from Sierra Leone, came over to Manchester and did, you know, very hard manual work, working for Manchester liners, firemen on ships. I think what really came home to me from looking through that archive and looking at the responses, that somebody like Len, I'm really sorry that it didn't happen at the time that he got the recognition that he should have got, but I'm happy now. And if I could just quickly say that I can remember my dad saying, as a young man in the 40s, himself and his brother taught themselves to box from a book by a Welsh boxer called Jimmy Wilde, because at the time, as a mixed race person in Barnsley, in Manchester, and a black man particularly, in some areas of Manchester, you had to be able to look after yourself and stand up for yourself, because racism in some areas was really, really horrendous. So, you know, I hope we get the statue for Len, and anything that this Mancunian across the border can do to help that happen. And again, excuse me, thank you to Len's family for keeping his memory alive, and to the museum and anybody else that's involved. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hazel. Yes, I would highlight the fact that we do indeed have a fantastic amount of material about Len Johnson. It's yeah, we have got Michael Herbert's research material. We have a scrapbook of the boxing career of Len. There's a lot about the New Internationalist Society and about the Pan-African Congress, and we are open. So if you want to book an appointment, we are able to have 2 readers in a day, and you would be most welcome to come in and browse our material. Please let us know if you'd like to do that. Sorry, Deej, have you got any comments on what Hazel said?
Yeah, I'd have to say that I think this is the thing, is that like there is such enormous credit which needs to go to the Working Class Movement Library for being for having that archive and keeping that record there, because it was like even like Michael Herbert says in the book, like it was through the library where he came across the story, and it was where everything was kept. And like there is and it, like it's been said with the family, now a lot of people, this might seem like I'm going off on a tangent, but like a lot of academics say that Africa doesn't have a history because it's the history is passed down to that oral tradition and is kept alive that way. And I think this is where there is a similarity between our working class communities in Britain and communities in sub-Saharan Africa, where that oral tradition is so important, where the telling the stories and making sure that things aren't forgotten. Because without people, like without Len's family telling the stories, without the boxing community saying things within themselves, without the Manchester left talking about Len, if we'd have waited for an establishment to to highlight this story, we'd be waiting forever. It is so incredibly important, and it's important for us to have spaces like the Working Class Movement Library, like the People's History Museum, there's the Freedom Movement libraries in Derry, which is so important for keeping these stories alive. Because what has happened in sub-Saharan Africa, when these stories aren't recorded, it's very easy for people to say that they never happened at all. And so like it was like, in fact, that's kind of how I came across the story of Len in the first place. It's like I was involved in Black Lives Matter Manchester. We had a huge demonstration in 2016 where we marched from Moss Side to to Manchester Town Hall, and we had over 5,000 people out at a rally and then the march. And then I was suddenly struck with this. Manchester's had a Black history for a long time. What has been here before? Like I knew about, because of my parents, I knew about the fight against the fascists in the 70s and 80s, but I didn't know about anything before that, really. And so many of us, like who are standing on the shoulders of of what has gone before, we just don't know. And so yeah, like massive credit to everybody who's kept the story alive. On the boxing thing, just quickly, yeah, like my dad, when he came over from Barbados, like he boxed, and it was the thing of like, it wasn't like for increasing discipline, it wasn't for it wasn't boxer size. It was, we need these skills to be able to literally survive. Like if you're in, like the Tories talk about, we need to introduce the hostile environment. We've had the hostile environment for 50, 60 years. And sometimes, like, even like in growing up in the 80s and 90s, if my dad hadn't taught me how to defend myself, my face would look a lot different than it does now. And I think this is a common history for immigrants in this country. It's why the Irish community, the traveller community, the now the South Asian community, our Black communities, our Jewish communities produce a disproportionate amount of boxers. We literally need to know how to fight to survive a lot of the time. And I think it's sad, but I think it's just our reality. And I think the statistics will bear it out that yes, boxing is one of the opportunities for us to earn our money, but it's also, as what the Black Panthers would call, the survival skills that we need.
Okay, I'm going to somebody who's had their hand up for a while here. Are you able to unmute yourself? Can you see? Is there a button there for?
Would you like to go?
Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Maria. I'm from Yorkshire. I'll just remind you, it's God's own country.
What have you started, Dee?
A couple of things that. First, and just in terms of archival material, just to remind people that there's also the Ahmed Iqbal Ullah Resource Centre in the basement of Manchester Central Library, and there's stacks of stuff there. Manchester has got a really long history of Black presence, right back from the Romans. So forget that. But I just want to say that it was really important to be reminded that Len is not only, thank you, Deej, for your talk. Len is not only somebody who's important for Black communities, although, as you said, walking into a museum and seeing a Black person still as a Black person, even there's a lot more about Black people, I'll link into that. I think, oh, a Black person, yeah, that's really, really interesting. And a lot of Black people do that. But he's not only significant for Black people, he's significant for all people. He's part of all our history. And it's good to be reminded. David Olusogu did a talk the other week, and he was saying that it's really nice to see Black and white people out together for the first time, protesting about racism in the Black Lives Matter. And I thought, hold up, what about Rock Against Racism, the Anti-Nazi League? But we're going back further. We're going back further to Len and other working class people, white and Black, working together. We can go back. Manchester's a very radical history. We can go back to the time when white workers were supporting the embargo on cotton coming from America. So that long history is part of everybody's history. So I think it's just important to raise that, and good on you for trying to get a statue to Len. I'll be signing the thing. I haven't seen it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think this is the thing, right? And it's like, I studied sociology, and in sociology they talk of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it basically says that unless you've got a full belly, unless you've got a secure roof over your head, unless you've got all those things covered, you are incapable. Humans are incapable of thinking beyond themselves and their immediate needs. Now, this is where I always fell out with sociology, because honestly, I know, like, with the cotton famine is the thing which stands out so brightly for me, because like I said before, like my white side of my family have been here for a long time, and have been fighting this fight, and they were there at Brown Peterloo. They would have been there as cotton strikers, and the working class community of Manchester has been long, like you say, has long been radical and has long been anti-racist. And I think we get in this narrative of the white working class being this racist group who are like by their nature reactionary. And I think it's the same kind of crap that we hear that was said about Black people being instinctively violent. It's the truth is a lot. The truth is a lot different to the narratives that we're told, and I think that it's that Len's story is. It's important. Yeah, it's important for Manchester's Black history, but it's important for our working class history. And there's always been more working class people than anybody else. And so, why is it that we can name all of like Henry VIII's wives, or we can know certain dates in history, but we can't tell you the name. Like most people can't tell you the name of Ignatius Sancho. Most people can't tell us the the names of the leaders of the marches on Peter's Field. And I think that it's really, really important, so important for our history to be taught. When I talk about our history, I don't mean black or white. I mean the ordinary working people, because it's just not there. Bill, what do you think?
I think everybody's nature is a good person. It's what they choose. It doesn't matter if you're white. It doesn't matter if you're black. You've got to show what you believe in outside and inside.
Yeah, and I think your actions speak, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, we have got explore the past, change the future as our library motto, and here is the future being changed directly by our newest recruit. That's fantastic. I've got a question in the chat, which is whether the Sierra Leone government is supporting the campaign.
You know what? That is an incredible. Like I saw that thing, and it was like that's an incredible idea, and I think that it's really. It would be really interesting to reach out. I happen to have some of my close friends from the student movement are Sierra Leonean. I may have some contacts there, and if anybody has contacts there, that would be really appreciated. I think Sierra Leone has been recently doing a lot of, because of the history of Sierra Leone, where it was, I don't know if people know, but a lot of free black men and women from the Americas went to Sierra Leone after emancipation. And so they've been doing a lot of work recently about their international Black history and their particular part of their particular place in the diaspora. So I think that would be really interesting to reach out. Also, just as a thing, I'd like to know what like the Irish government would have to say about Len too, because like whilst Len is obviously is racialized and is seen as this black hero, well, should be seen as a black hero. I think that the Manchester's Irish history is huge, and also sadly, it's been largely untold as well. Like whether it be the history of the Angel Meadow, or the history of the Navvies, or the history of how the Manchester Catholic community completely changed the political landscape of Greater Manchester and Liverpool ever since the 1840s. I think that there is something to explore there, and I think that I'd love to have those conversations both with Sierra Leonean people and Irish people as well, of going, how could we do this, and how can we represent your Len as much as ours, really.
Maria asks whether Len ever wrote anything autobiographical.
So I know that he was working on an autobiography. Like Len was as well as being a boxer and an activist, he also had he wrote newspaper columns, boxing. He also wrote fictionalized stories, I think like comic strip kind of things, based on like these tales of these boxers, which are seen as my understanding is that they were semi-autobiographical, telling the tales of these boxers, but who were mainly white, to be able to sell the things. I know that he was working on an autobiography, but it was never published, and I honestly don't know what's happened to those papers.
Yeah, there's nothing in the library as far as I'm aware. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the chat, people giving interesting links and their own stories, and a lot of thanks and praise to our brilliant two presenters. And I'm happy to have anybody else wave their hand at me if you want to. Right, Sue. Hang on, you just unmute yourself, Sue.
Yeah, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but I think it shows what a good showman he was. It's a picture of Len Johnson's boxing booth. Can you actually see that on the screen?
Put it higher up.
Is that better?
Bit higher? Yes.
Yeah.
Can we see that now? If you talk now and people are looking at the speaker view, say something to us now.
All right. It's just that picture was in our Manchester Fighters book. It's not a great picture, but it's the decorative food, I think. And it shows how good he was at sort of publicising things, you know. It's, yeah.
Hey, see, there's always something that our speakers didn't know about. So there's something good. I'll share the chat file with you, Deej, and yeah, if you want me to put you in touch with Sue, then I can certainly do that. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the chat. Is anybody got a question or a comment they would like to share with us? I am looking at as many people as I well know. I think we might be getting to a conclusion. It's always a fascinating thing on a Wednesday afternoon, but when people's passion really comes across and is shared, and you can feel it being magnified, even on a Zoom session, that's a truly terrific thing. And Deej, that has certainly happened today. So that's brilliant. Anything you would like to leave us with?
Firstly, just thank you to everybody for being interested and for coming in, hearing the story being shared. I think the biggest thing that we can do is to continue to tell the story, and if it's just going to your neighbor, have you heard about this thing which I heard about today? It keeps the story out there. For anybody who's on Facebook, we started just a few weeks ago, the Len Johnson Memorial Campaign's Facebook group and Facebook page for us to, if people could like that. I think it's just going to be a really easy way for us to share things and to keep in touch, because I think we obviously I feel it people are interested and want to be part of the thing, and now we're getting that. Starting to get that support for the idea. I think the next part is the dirty part, the hard, the bit which I don't really like to start talking about. But at some point, they will need to start asking for some donations. A couple of unions have offered to put some money in, and a couple branches of local Labour parties, and I think the Communist Party have said that they would put a little bit of money in. But statues are expensive things, and so if people can be in touch with the group, that when we need to do a GoFundMe type thing or a Just Giving type thing, if people would see it, and then if they could throw in like a couple of quid and to share the thing, it would be incredibly helpful, because I think the council will be far more likely to go ahead with something if they don't have to fund everything themselves.
Maria is saying, how about asking boxing authorities for money?
So personally, I've got a feeling about that the British Boxing Board of Control kind of owe black boxers some form of reparations for what they did. Whether it's going to be so easy to get them to get them to put their hand in their pockets, I think there's a discussion which needs to be had. Also, I think like going to I'm just thinking of like Anthony Joshua and likes of the black British boxers who've come since, who've they obviously have to like they're making their living, but if we can get some donations from the likes of those, that would be massive. And I think asking for some money from somebody who gets a couple of million for a boxing match, it should be easier really than getting and trying to raise money from the likes of us who are living through a pandemic with the risk of redundancy every day. So, but yeah, like if people can be in touch, obviously if they can sign the petition, but if they can keep in touch with the campaign, it'd be incredible.
Yeah, well, you're certainly getting people saying that they would like to stay in touch. If people obviously want to, our e-bulletin, which goes out every week, every week at the moment, we can certainly flag up when the fundraising campaign is underway. And I guess there's a Len Johnson page on our website, which Jane flagged up in the chat earlier, and we could certainly put a link there as somebody has suggested. So yeah, we are very happy to be supportive of this, and we've been happy to host this, but I mean more than happy, because it's been fantastic to have such an important and impassioned speaker on Len's behalf. So it's certainly it's great that you've found Len in this unusual way of him being 5 doors down from your grandparents, but that you shared him with us in this fantastic way. So I think on behalf of everyone, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to both of you for your contributions, and yeah, more virtual applause coming in. I'm sorry you can't hear it, but you can see a lot of it. So thank you very much, everybody, and we do hope to see as many of you as possible again this time next week. 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 4th of November, is our next talk by Cyril Pearce, and he will be talking about his new book, Communities of Resistance, Conscience and Dissent in Britain During the First World War, which again is something which is very much an important focus of our collection. So we are looking him sharing that. That book has been long in the gestation, so that's terrific. If you did join us late and you want, or if you just want to see it all again because it was so good, then I will be uploading it later to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/WCM Library, but there'll be a link also from the event page on the website. There's also a donate button if you feel while you're waiting for the statue fund that you've got a bit of money to head the library's way, then do please click on that donate button. We would just like to say, as I always sign off, thank you very much to everyone. In solidarity, many thanks from all at the Working Class Movement Library. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, okay.